Hello. I want to take a minute to go over SDS functionality for chemical companies inherent in the VicinityChem product. Specifically, I want to talk about how Vicinity creates an SDS or a GHS, as well as some of the boundaries or the limitations to that in the VicinityChem product. Specifically, let's go and take a look at a formula that I've got out here. It's making some red paint. I've got some ingredients listed out here with some various quantities, etc. I'm just going to go ahead and show where and how we can print that, just the printer icon on the top left. And I've got various documents that I can print, compliance type documents. I'm going to go ahead and print a GHS SDS and just kind of display it up onto the screen so that this is highly configurable, obviously logo and things like that. And I just want to point out a couple of areas that we can talk about. First off, it picks up product information, name and things like that. It also starts picking up some hazard paragraphs where you see toxic to aquatic life and causes mild skin irritation, etc. Those are referred to as hazard paragraphs. Then we also have the the reportable components section, where we've got various reportable items based on various thresholds, carcinogens at 1/10 of 1%, etc. And you can show the component description as you want it presented on the compliance document, as well as the CAS number, which is stored on the item, as well as a weight, the actual weight if you want, or a range. And then the rest of it is just more of the same. We have various sections with various hazard paragraphs. Now I'm going to stay on this screen and just talk basically about how our system is designed and where it fits and where it doesn't. This works really well for companies that have formulas that can be easily put into definable categories, hazard categories, if you will, or we call them classes. So formulas that share the same hazard paragraphs would be in the same class. And so you would then assign a formula into a predefined class, and every formula within that class would get these hazard paragraphs. There are some overrides associated with that based on some ingredients or even based on a specific formula, so you can have exceptions to that, but generally speaking, all formulas within a class would get the same hazard paragraphs. Now, the part that would vary from a formula to formula would be the reportable components. That's probably obvious, but we look at each individual formula, identifying the various hazard reportable components and show them specifically for that formula. So if you're in a situation where you have kind of common hazard paragraphs, but of course unique reportable components, then VicinityChem's SDS or compliance functionality might work rather well for you. If that doesn't work, and what you really need is the formula to be, an external database, if you will, going and keeping up with all of the requirements, and each formula needs to be reviewed independently of each other. We actually do have integrations to outside SDS, GHS generation applications. One most notably is XS. We will take the formula and CAS number and percent by weight, send it to their system. Their system does the calculation and hands it back to us as a completed PDF. So there is a way to do and certainly to send out GHS SDS from within Vicinity, even if we're not generating the compliance document ourselves. So let me talk a little bit about this and kind of walk through it. First off, let me talk about the ingredient, the reportable component section. Let me just go ahead and double click on an item, and we'll just use this one as an example. So this particular ingredient can have certain safety information associated with it. So, for example, when you print a batch ticket, you could show the placard and safety information, etc. But I really want to drive to these hazard types. So when you set up an inventory item, you would identify certain hazard types that you're using. These are user definable. You can create any ones that you want. I've got one set up for a 10% range. So, for example, it has got a it is marked as a hazard, and when I display it on the SDS, I want it in a 10% range. This is just a setup where you set up the hazard types. Now, the way you put these hazards and reportable components on an SDS is actually done from within our compliance setup. And I'm just going to go ahead and bring up the compliance class and talk just a little bit about this. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up this GHS. These are the various sections that you're probably familiar with. They've got section number and a description associated with them. Looks like I've got a Spanish one in there. Let me go to under my section 3, and I get into my reportable components is where I've got mine showing. And what the system is looking for are various hazard types. You can have as many of them as you want as you set up an item, and you can put them into, you can assign a raw material into a hazard type category. In this case, we saw it as a 10% range as one of them. But what we're doing is saying, I want to include any one of these hazard types in that reportable components section. And when I do that, I can also send additional information. So if I want the PEL or the PEL or the TLV, I can just assign that. So there's my exposure limit that I can add to the report. I can also add additional information like any attributes and things like that. So we can send any information we really want to about that item to the GHS SDS. I'm going to go back and talk about these hazard types in just a second, but while I'm here, let me just talk about how we come up with the text phrases. So the rest of this would be the same for all formulas that you are associating with this hazard, this compliance class. So in inhalation, I have a text phrase out here, and so you go set up text phrases, and here is the standard text that I would want to be using in this section in inhalation for this type of formula. Again, we get down into eyes and skin, etc., and so on. The whole idea here is that we're using standard text, and you're applying this standard text to this class and then assign a formula into that class. So if that works well for you, then we can render an SDS well for you. Now, in talking about the setup of our hazard types, I'll just go ahead and open that screen and talk a little bit about that. So my 10% range is basically saying I have a reporting threshold for this ingredient if it is above, in this case, 1% by weight of the formula. And when I do represent the number, I want to round it to the nearest 10%. Now we've got some standard settings here. You can also override them if you want to make them custom. But so I'm going to round it to the nearest 10%. So I'm not showing the exact percentage. I'm just showing it rounded, and it can display like this in ranges, if you will. And I can continue that with any other ranges that I want to. So in this case, this is a carcinogen, or the carcinogen hazard type. I can associate this hazard type with any ingredient, and if that ingredient is more than 0.1% by weight, then I want to show round to the nearest 1%. So the whole idea here is that we're trying to give you the ability to identify what hazards and hazard types you want on your GHS, and then give you the ability to define that. It's really a one-time setup, and most companies that are using our compliance module probably have 4 or 5 classes that they have different types of formulas, and again, all formulas within that class share the same hazard types. The same the same text phrases in these sections, but the reportable components section would be different for each of those formulas. Kind of back to what we're talking about then on the component. So this is where I assigned the 10% range. Now you know where it came from, and I can add any number of them that I need to. So for example, if this were actually a carcinogen, I could come in and add that, and I can put it up in if it being a carcinogen, then if it's more than 1/10 of 1%, it would show up as a reportable component. Anyway, that's how we associate hazard types to an item, and that's how hazard types get on the SDS. So at the end of the day, what you have when you create a new formula is under compliance, you're saying this is the class that we've got listed in here, and we want to use this particular format. In this case, I've got an English and a Spanish version, and from there I can actually print my compliance document as you've already seen. So that's how it's done. There is also the ability to print a group of compliance documents, so print compliance documents, and I can do it either at the formula level or I can do it at the component, in other words, a finished good level if I want to do that. And then I can also save these and output them, if you will, as PDFs so that they will be stored in a particular location on your machine. Or put it up on the website, etc. So we can create, print a group of compliance documents, and you can do that with a range. So I can say from this formula to this formula. Let me go ahead and just do this. Let's just go all. So if I do this, I've got a list of all of my formulas listed here, and I can hand pick which ones I actually want to generate. And when I generate this, it will actually output it and create a PDF, a file format that you could then put up on a website, etc. Anyway, I hope that helps. So we've got, if you fit within our area of expertise, then we can create your GHS. Also know that if you need more, we have integrations to other GHS, SDS rendering applications. And the process is we'll send the data electronically to their system. Typically it's a table or a web service that we write to. They pick it up and do their work, and they hand it back, in this case typically as a PDF, and it'll be stored into our system. Anyway, I hope that helps, and look forward to talking with you soon. Thanks a lot and have a great day.